Today is the 24th of July, and it is a Friday in the year 2009, and we're here in the council chambers for our meeting. We have a quorum here with Mr. Rosendahl, Mr. Wesson, and Ms. Hahn, as well as myself present. And so with that, why don't we start out with our general public comment, and we have Dr. Clyde Williams. Good morning.
Good morning. Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno. As a public comment, life cycle costs. Today you're going to consider several tens of millions of dollars of capital investment and a couple of positions and a few other things. Why not have an estimate as to how much this is going to cost the taxpayers of Los Angeles for the next 10 years, not just capital, but the operations, maintenance, overhead, labor costs. Because labor costs equals pensions. Pensions are a big problem. Full life cycle costs, that's probably too much. But at least a 10-year operations, maintenance, and overhead budget would really give us the true cost. My rough estimate is that item 1 will have about $5 million per year of operations and maintenance, if not more, plus replacement, plus depreciation. The issue is who's going to pay for it? And by the way, $5 million is the total budget for 90 neighborhood councils. So let's get real about the cost, not only for now, but also the future. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments and thank you for the suggestion. And we do have, just as a point of information for the public, costs to the general fund and any matches that are required. Obviously, some of those get dicey because, for instance, the replacement of grates, there's maintenance of those even if we don't replace them with the same number of people. So it's not a $5 million new cost. It would be an existing cost. But it's a great suggestion. We appreciate the public comment. Good morning. Let's go to item 1. And actually, before we hear from our great folks up here, Dr. Williams, would you like to come forward again on item number 1? Okay, the point was well made. Let's go ahead and hear a report. Good morning.
Good morning. Jim Clark, Director of Federal Relations, the Office of the Mayor. Well, the federal government giveth and the state taketh away, I guess. Is that the... Last week I wasn't at the meeting because I was back in Washington, D.C., trying to accomplish two things. One, talking to our congressional delegation to inform them about how the ARA funding is going here in the city and what we're doing and some of the problems that are associated with it, particularly asking for their support, which they're very willing to give. Most of these grants that we're applying for are competitive grants, and they're very competitive. In fact, we found that these grants are way oversubscribed. To give you an example, the high-speed rail funding, that's $8 billion nationally. They've received $102 billion worth of applications for that funding. The COPS program that we submitted for, that's a $2 billion program. Nationally, they've received $8 billion worth of grant applications for it. Even the one that we received, the small grant from the National Endowment of the Arts for $250,000 that we received, we understood that only 20% of the organizations that applied received funding for it. So these grants are very, very competitive, and we think that by having 14 members of a congressional delegation and 2 U.S. senators, and if we can help get them to weigh in on things, that it helps our position in terms of going after it. So that's one of the reasons I was back in D.C. to ask for their support, and they seem to be willing to help us. The other thing that we're finding, too, is that we received a notification on a grant for the Diesel Emission Reduction Act. We had submitted 6 grant applications under this, and we only had one funded. We had asked for $6 million in funding, and we got just under $2 million is what we've got. So I think one of the things that we're noticing, too, and that one of the things I wanted to talk to our congressional and senatorial delegation about was the fact that there may be an attempt in order to spread this money out, that they're giving everybody a haircut on their projects, a severe haircut, and then funding a lot of smaller projects all around the country so that they can get the money out. But the problem with that then is if you've got a really big, good, important project, it's not not going to get funded. So we're asking them, it's too early to tell if that's the trend, but that may be a trend that we're going to have to deal with, which also means that in our competitive grants, we need to scale our projects so that they can be scaled back if we're going to get haircuts through them. I wanted to spend a little time talking to you today about to give you a bigger picture about the three items that you're going to be discussing the grant applications. The first one is the transportation enhancement activities and why it is that you're receiving and going to be reviewing a project. When the federal government made available the surface transportation money to the state, when that money came into the state, the first 10% of that money was taken off the top of that to be used for transportation enhancement activities, which are such things as median landscaping, sound walls, bike paths, other things that aren't directly related to building roads or those kinds of things. And so that money's taken off the top, and then there was a split between the state getting 60% of the funding and the cities getting 40% of the funding, which ended up with us getting $118 million worth of projects. Unbeknownst to us, we had in our $118 million worth of projects, we had $4 million set aside to do bike safe grading projects. And we did not realize that the MTA had taken $1 million of that funding and decided and submitted it to Caltrans for them to pay for it out of the transportation enhancement activities. So then we actually got $1 million more that we were able to use for street resurfacing. This project here then is extra money over and above the $118 million. It's $748,000 worth of funding over and above that we'll be able to do. So what we did is they moved part of the bike safe grading out of our $118 million, paid for it out of a different fund, and allowed us to use that money to do more street resurfacing. But we wanted you to be aware of the project because it is additional money that will be coming into the city that it's found money in a way. The second one is a little more complicated, is the two ones that you'll be receiving grant proposals on for TIGER. TIGER stands for Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery. And this is the
That really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Not to be confused with Tigger, which is the greenhouse gas. Yeah.
Or a Tiger team.
Yes,
is a total different.
So this is the $1.5 billion discretionary fund for the Secretary of Transportation for projects of regional or national significance. The requirements are the projects have to be a minimum of at least $20 million and no more than $300 million, and each state is limited to no more than $300 million per state. The priorities for these projects are generally projects of an intermodal nature and that directly relate to goods movement. The deadline on these submissions is September 15th. However, here in California, they're trying to create a process by which California would go forward with a consensus on a package of projects that everybody could get behind. There was an informal agreement which basically splits the $300 million target with $120 million for Northern California and the Central Valley and $180 million coming to Southern California. Within our area here, we have a regional consensus group which is made up of the 5 county transportation authorities, the 2 ports, Los Angeles and Long Beach, the Alameda Corridor and Alameda Corridor East. And this group have been meeting on a regular basis and have come forward with putting together a group of projects and 2 of those are the projects that we're submitting as part of that package. And just also, by way of background, the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation has done a study of these various projects and have indicated that the 2 projects that we're proposing would create a minimum of 5,000 jobs as a result of that. And I know that Councilwoman Hahn will be very interested to know that that's a job creator down in the port area that we would be doing. Yeah, we'll make it. Yes, of course.
I think they're only for CD15 constituents that you like.
Now, this consensus group, though, actually is going to be submitting more than $180 million worth of projects. In fact, they're considering $380 million worth of projects to give to the governor. The deadline is the first week in August. All these
That's on
projects,
top of the 300, another 380?
the $380 million, instead of just limiting it to $180 million,
okay,
we're going to do
gotcha.
$380 million. Because the problem is if we can't come to consensus, we may go forward as a group and submit our projects
Absolutely.
directly. We hope that's not going to happen. But the idea is the first week of August, these projects are submitted to the governor's office. The governor is putting together a screening committee to review all the projects from around the state. Art Leahy from MTA and Ann Meyer from Riverside are on the screening panel, and we expect that possibly Geraldine Natz from the port will also be added to that panel. So they're supposed to go through, review these projects, and see if we can come up with one combined California submission of a series of projects. Then it'll be up, though, to each individual entity that has a project to actually go ahead and submit the project. So when the port comes up to explain that, I wanted to give you a background of how these two projects fit into the overall scheme of things. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the fact that 2 weeks ago at the meeting, Councilman Rosendahl suggested that we do a town hall meeting for his constituents, and I was pleased to report that we were able to do one last this past Wednesday, and appreciate very much the opportunity to speak to the community about what we're doing, as well as arranging for Channel 35 to cover it so that it'll get broad exposure.
Mr. Chair,
Please, of course, Mr. Rosendahl.
I got to say, Jim, that you're a great guy and a treasure to our city. First of all, when the mayor appointed you to this position, little did we know there would be such a strategy to develop, and so quickly you've developed it, and every week to have new projects, new ideas, be in the competitive race, trying to get as much as we can for the city. So my hat's off to you personally for your leadership and your professionalism. Secondly, the other night, I was very happy that Channel 35 covered it, because it's the bigger story. It's not just my district that we were trying to discuss in a meeting like that. But the folks in the audience that were there were true leaders who've been engaged in lots of issues in the community, and their perspective has always been what's better for the community, what's good for the overall sensing. And I hope they gave you ideas from a grassroots level that can challenge us. I mean, we're elected officials, we only can do so much, but if the public engages themselves appropriately in this process, it'll be a win-win for everything. So I really want to thank you for how you handled yourself, and of course I want to thank my community out there for showing up and participating with you. Thank you. Thank you.
That's my report.
All right, thanks very much. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill Kreitz with the CAO's office. Just to give you a brief overview of the project management aspect of the ARA project, we've nearly completed the first round of our quality assurance checks on all the database that we maintain on these projects, and that helps to create the report that you have in front of you. We're still waiting for some responses from departments, and when that comes in, which will hopefully be early next week, we will be able to provide you some long-awaited dashboard reports showing various information about the ARA grant process. With respect to grant applications submitted since the last meeting, there were zero as far as we can tell this week. There were 73 grants. There are a total of 73 grant applications submitted as of today, for a total of $840 million that we are requesting in ARA funding. The total estimated grant awards to date for the city is about $289 million, and we have one grant application that will be submitted this week.
Were we up to 293, or did I remember that?
We were at 291 last week, but as a result of going through the quality assurance checks on the report, we found that we had some things that were double counted. So you are right.
So about $2 million in change wasn't really under the couch seats there.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think a 1% leeway is okay with this committee. In terms of the general, we'll go into the individual grants shortly. I want to thank you, too, for the trip to Washington. I think the strategy with individual members of Congress is very good, and your experience in particular is well suited for that. Do let individual council offices know if we can supplement that as well with our regular conversations to our representatives on any specific grants, or just in a general way if there's some talking points that we should be just picking up the phone and saying, X, Y, and Z to them, let us know, because I know that my members would be interested in doing that with their members of Congress, and could help do that as well. Okay. Yeah, is it about specific ones or just the overview? Because we're going to go into... Okay, let's get the brief then on 1A, if we may, first. Thank you. Okay. And there's a map for this one, folks, in front of us. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning. Do you want to start off any project? I'm Mike Brown with the Street and Stormwater Division, Bureau of Engineering, and I'd like to give you just a little overview of what this project is about. We have approximately 175 locations where we have gratings in our catch basins in the gutter, and about 250 grates. Some of those have 2 or 3 grates, and we're going to be replacing about 250 grates so that they are bike safe, which means that currently...
So just to be clear, for folks that might be listening, these are the flat grates on the ground. They're not the...
Correct.
They're not the grates that you see perpendicular that are in the storm drains. They're the flat ones that have...
That is correct,
big spaces.
Yeah. So as bikes go over them, currently sometimes the tires will get caught in the grates. I believe we have about 4 claims where people have been hurt. Who knows how many people have been, caught in these grates, fallen down, got up, brushed themselves off, and continued on their way. So our goal here is to replace all of these grates in the city with bike-safe grates, which have a larger grate spacing so that the tires don't get caught, and much more cross-racing so that the tires don't actually go into the grate. So we're slated to replace these grates. Some of those grates have other problems where the concrete is deteriorated, the steel frame is deteriorated. We'll be fixing those as well, so that's also a safety issue. We're looking at about 6 months of construction when we do award this. We're ready to send this to our bid and award group next week for this project. We're looking at about 1 month before we go out to advertise. It's a 5-week advertising period, at which point we receive our bids, and between 2 and 3 months, our Office of Contract Compliance with Contract Administration goes through the bids, and we're ready to award. We should have front funding in place at that point. Then we can go ahead and award this project.
And how many jobs do we estimate will come from those contracts? Put a number on that?
We were just going through that. We were looking at...
We have 5 construction laborers that will be fabricating, removal, and installing the grates. We have 1 construction supervisor. All 6 of those are contracted new jobs. And 2 city staff, 1 civil engineering associate 3, and a field inspector for quality assurance. And
okay.
Now that is for the entire... $3.75 million for all the grate.
They'll be able to do all of this.
Right, not just for this project.
Right, absolutely. Okay. I know.
Just a quick question.
Ms. Perry, yeah.
Just a quick question, because I'm constantly monitoring not only the bike grates, but obviously the grates covering the sewer openings, but for the TMDLs, but it's possible to vandalize the bike grates too, especially when you have a deteriorating curb or a portion of the street that's deteriorating. And I just want to make sure that we're leveraging our investment in this infusion of new money. Are these more vandal-proof than the previous type of grate? They're more safety-oriented, but I want to know that they can't be dug out and lifted out and then gone and sold.
You mean and used for scrap metal and...
Yes.
Yeah. They should be, they should be more secure. And
What's
actually,
the difference in the way the city is affixing them to the street this time?
I don't believe that we have taken a look at that aspect, and I think that's a good point.
Would you
something
please...
that we can go back and take a look at.
Yeah, because, it's a shame to put them in and then
have them
somebody
stolen.
figures out how to, excavate them out of the street and take them, especially,
Right.
we're probably going to experience something of a slowdown in repair of curbs and gutters and, that sort of thing. And I just don't want to squander this opportunity and make sure that we do what we're supposed to do to make sure that we maintain our investment.
Right, that's a good point. I'll
Okay.
definitely look into that. and
Just like,
see.
when there was an increase in the price of copper per linear foot, and then people started vandalizing our light standards.
Oh, and they even were taking manhole covers, which,
Right, it's the same
nobody would have
thing.
thought of. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mr. Rosenthal?
What you're doing. Good morning, first of all, and thanks for being here.
Will you just take the microphone a little closer to you so we can hear you
Oh, I'm
better?
sorry. Yeah. First, good morning, and I'm glad you guys are here. The 250 that you mentioned, how did you identify them, and were the bicyclists involved with any input on this?
We have 4 projects total. We are finishing up our first project to replace bike safe gratings for about $500,000. What we did was we actually went into Navigate LA and looked at all of our catch basins within the bike routes. There's bike routes, bike lanes, bike paths. Once we identified those, we had to actually go out and field check them to see which of those catch basins, because like it was pointed out, a lot of those catch basins are side opening, which don't affect bicyclists.
Right.
We had to check and see which one of those had grates in the gutter that would affect bicyclists. We created a database so that we identified all of those that we could in the city. And then we worked with the Department of Transportation's bike people to prioritize. Now, when these ARA projects came down, we were caught by surprise, and we saw great, as far as shovel-ready, we had the database.
Right.
We could put together the plans very quickly and still qualify. So we tried to capture everything else that we had in this package. Now, our database is not perfect, and we're still modifying, and we're still finding new catch basins where we need to do this, and that's where the 4th project comes in, which we already had identified through the NTA call for projects, and we had approved. Now, once we finish this one, we'll go back and try to fix any other ones that are left. And in addition to that, we'd like to take a look at the non-city facilities such as LA County and Caltrans. They're located within the city, and replace those bike rates as well, with the approval and the coordination with MTA and Caltrans.
That's very good, because that was going to be my second question. The coordination with the county, because we're all in this physicalness together, as well as obviously in my area, Culver City, Santa Monica, and Marina del Rey, that it's all one connection from a bicyclist standpoint. But you feel comfortable that you've gotten through all of the things we've been doing lately, their input, because they're very aggressive and active and engaged on this issue.
Well, right now we've been concentrating on the city-owned facilities.
Sure.
Since we have money left, since we've been able to take care of, we feel, almost all of the city-owned facilities with the ARA funding. We want to take advantage of having that money left over from the MTA call,
Right.
and then we want to start coordinating with county and Caltrans to see if we can start replacing
Has
some of
Michelle
their...
Mallory from our DOT department looked at this, and if I was a bicyclist and wanted to go online and see if I think the route that I take every day has the ones I would identify, is there that kind of a clarity for the internet, at least, for them to look at?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Whatever you can do to put stuff on the internet that explains this, especially if it's a link to the city DOT/bicycle community, they're very engaged on the internet on these issues, and they will look at that, besides the physical map, that we got here. And they might be able to give you input that we might have overlooked within our normal strategies of doing it. Because my theory is we need to create bike lanes that bicyclists know about. I mean, the reason I don't ride a bike, to be honest with you, besides being an old uncoordinated guy, is the fear of safety issues for me. I mean, I'm not going to get doored, and I don't want somebody hitting me. Life's tough enough for me. But folks have figured it out. Bike routes. And so sometimes we could create certain routes that would be safer, and this is a fabulous strategy and fabulous forms of monies to help us do that.
Yeah, I was very fortunate that we were able to do
But
this.
put it online, make it more friendly so people can see that.
Absolutely, and we'll talk to DOT, the people that we worked with before, and we'll talk about putting this project on the internet so people can see exactly which gratings we're replacing.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Good discussion so far. So it's your opinion that these are the 250 best locations, so to speak, to replace these grates?
Well, these are 250 that we took out of the, we're looking at basically 1,000 gratings. We separated out 250.
So we have 1,000 grates. So about how many more, and do we need to replace all of those?
Yes.
Yes.
These are ones that are the old style, and they're dangerous to bicyclists.
So you picked 250 that you think are the most...
We pulled
make
out...
for the most safe bike lanes in a certain area?
Actually, we probably arbitrarily pulled out 250 out of the 1,000 because these projects are basically going in parallel. So our overall, the funding will allow us to do about 1,000 catch basin grates. We had to split it so that we could utilize the T funds. So we took out the 250. I don't think there was a lot of reasoning as to which was a priority because we're basically doing this in parallel.
So you're doing all 1,000 right now. I get it. And just 250 are going to be paid for through this grant.
That's correct.
Okay, so this grant talks about a whopping 6 jobs that will be retained and 2 that will be created?
Yes.
I barely know where to begin. Tell me about the 2 jobs that will be created. What are those jobs?
Well, the 2 jobs are city jobs, city engineering.
6 created and 2 retained. That's what I said.
Right. The contracted out are 5 construction...
Create 6, retain 2. Okay, so what are the 6 jobs that we will create?
Construction laborers, there'll be 5. They do the fabrication of the grates, removal of the existing, installation, and work out any additional fixes in the concrete. And the inspector will check for compliance of the grates as they're installed. And then there's a city inspector also to verify that.
And just for when we talk about these grants that come into the city, and one of the explanations in the grant was that it would relieve traffic congestion. Are we just basically assuming that this will allow more people to bike safely and that will reduce congestion, or what's the thinking behind how this reduces traffic congestion?
I believe that was one of our considerations, was that by making it safer for bicyclists, we're encouraging people to bicycle rather than to use their cars. That's one of the things that we're trying to do with other...
Now, it also says the construction date is 2010, is that right, for this? Or is that what this says?
Is that what it says? We hope to be in construction sooner than...
Okay, maybe I was looking at another grant.
Yeah.
Just not 210. When do you expect to have all these completed, these 1,000?
We're looking at about 6 months construction. Let's see. If we go out to... We're looking at probably about 3 to 4 months to be out on the street. And of course, there's going to be a lot of time during that construction period for manufacturing of the grates. A lot of that's the reasons we don't have a lot of jobs for this amount of money is that a lot of that is in the manufacturing of the grates. We're looking at 6 months to have the 250 grates for the T funding done, and about a year to manufacture and install all of the grates, the 750 grates for the other funding.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentations. Let's move to the Port of Los Angeles funds then. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, President Garcetti, council members. I'm Mike Christensen, Deputy Executive Director at the Port of Los Angeles. Project listed as B on your agenda is the West Basin Rail Yard located in South Wilmington. It's a project that has a total value of about $112.5 million. We're seeking Tiger funds for $48.8 million of that amount. The project builds a new rail yard on a site currently being utilized by a auto importing firm, and it primarily provides the ability to enhance and leverage our on-dock rail capacity in the West Basin portion of the Port of Los Angeles. And it does this by a couple means. The first thing it does is it permits the relocation of a current rail operation that's on the backlands of the TRAPAC terminal. And as you may recall from some actions that came before Council several months ago, the TRAPAC terminal is the one terminal in the Port of Los Angeles that does not have an on-dock rail yard. So by building this West Basin rail yard, we're able to move the current rail operations out, put them in a new home, and then build an on-dock rail yard on TRAPAC. There are tremendous benefits that come from on-dock rail yards, which I think play beautifully to what Jim had mentioned as to the purposes of the Tiger program. We feel very comfortable that this meets those purposes. The project is about at the halfway point on design. We are anticipating putting this out to bid in the latter part of 2010, with some of the intervening time being taken up by some rather extensive utility relocation. This job will generate about 2,200 construction jobs, but I think it's important to note that this job, along with the others in this portion of the harbor, also support well-paying, permanent jobs that number into the tens of thousands. So with that, if you have specific questions, I can answer those. If you'd like me to get deeper into the project, I can do that as well.
Can I just ask you something on the math? The paperwork I have here shows that there was $51.23 million in 1B funds, $8 million in Metro. If we got the 48.8 here, I show a shortfall still of about 4.5. Is that picked up by the port, or is there a gap there, or was this an application for the balance that's remaining?
We have that covered under harbor revenue funds in the subsequent year capital budget at the harbor, so that is covered.
Is that a requirement for match, or is there any reason we wouldn't just, instead of 48 million, go for the full 53 or whatever?
I think we wanted to stick with the 48. I think that was the figure that, working with Jim and with the consensus group that Jim had mentioned, was the comfortable one there. And we already had some budget in that for harbor revenue funds, so we were suggesting keeping that number where you see it.
Okay. Ms. Hahn?
So the jobs again, this project will result in the creation of 2,300 private sector jobs.
That's correct, Council Member.
And what would those jobs be?
Those would be a combination of construction trade jobs that are on the ground at the job site and the direct support jobs that would support those, the concrete suppliers, the steel, the aggregate, and so forth.
And the 318,000 retention, how are you accounting for that?
That would be at the other end of the spectrum. That would look at all the goods movement jobs that would emanate from those facilities in the West Basin. The fact that without the on-dock rail, those terminals would likely start to dwindle. Also, all the jobs associated with the goods movement through the rail systems, the longshore jobs on the docks that would benefit from the higher levels of traffic that would come because of this project.
You know, there's always a concern in Wilmington with the trains, and I know there's been some discussion about a kind of reconfiguring or relocation of the Watson Yard train line there. Is there any hope that I can give Wilmington that maybe we could look at either stimulus dollars, or now that you have this stimulus dollars for this project, maybe we use some other funds to look at relocating that line, which goes right through residential Wilmington, and they can hear the cars, clanking all night long?
Well, Councilwoman, while there's not a direct link between this project and the Wilmington operations in the Watson Yard, I think there may be some indirect links. Because in essence, what we're doing is building a new facility that does some of the same things that Watson Yard does. So it would give us the ability to have some additional infrastructure in the harbor that perhaps we could work with the railroad and trying to find ways to de-emphasize some of their operations that are in the residential parts of town.
That would be great. Well, I would love to see us maybe look at that possibility long term. I think that would be one of the things that community would be forever grateful for, is we could figure out how to relocate a lot of this train movement.
We can certainly do that.
But clearly, on-dock rail is very critical for us being a competitive port. I think that's probably more than anything is important to the shipping industry and the end users, as they get that cargo in there, unloaded, on the rail, and out of here as quickly as possible. That is what I think gives us the competitive edge, probably more than anything.
That is correct. Not only is it in demand from our customers, but every truck that goes on, every container goes on that train, as you're aware, Councilwoman, is one less container that's on the roads or the freeways in the harbor area.
Right. I mean, there's still a certain percentage of that cargo will be trucked because it goes less than 5 miles, but still, this is a good move.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, let's move to the second one then.
Project noted as C on your agenda is another element in the same area, South Wilmington grade separation. As part of the construction of this new rail yard and the on-dock rail yard at Trapac, it will be required to put a grade separation that will allow access into that portion of the harbor for not only the Trapac terminal, but for all the other industrial users in that part of South Wilmington, and in addition for the new waterfront development in South Wilmington. This grade separation is relatively large, relatively complicated. As you can see by the cost, it's $73 million total project cost. We are looking at about almost $33 million of Tiger funds. It does create about another 1,400 some odd construction jobs, but also contributes to all the other jobs that we were discussing in the rail yard project. In addition to providing the access that we need, grade separated access, it will also allow us to relocate the entrance to the Trapac terminal from the corner of Harry Bridges and Figueroa, where the trucks will occasionally queue up right up against the edge of the South Wilmington neighborhoods. Will allow those trucks to come down and enter the terminal at a different location, vastly enhancing the quality of life in South Wilmington. So this project is well along on its design. We are, again, about at the halfway point on design on this project, with an anticipation to get this out to bid about 1 year from right now. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions on this project.
So will this will remove the track that goes across Avalon for people trying to get down to the waterfront?
What it will do, Councilwoman, is...
It'll be a grade separation, so...
That's correct.
So...
It's on the alignment that would be analogous to Lagoon Street. And if you're coming into Wilmington, or into that portion of the West Basin currently on Fries Avenue or on Avalon, you would, under the new plan, you would come over the grade separation slightly to the west of that location, and it would allow you access to all elements.
So the car traffic will go above the train track?
That's correct. Cars over the top, cars and trucks over the top, rail at grade.
What about pedestrians?
Pedestrians, bikes would all have a way to get over on the same grade separation.
That's great. Well, that'll, as the application talks about, it'll really provide better access to the waterfront that we're trying to redevelop for the community of Wilmington.
Absolutely.
Plus, anybody that's ever sat there and waited for that train, sometimes it's
a long wait.
20 minutes, even though that's really not legal in the city of Los Angeles. Many times it stops that long trying to get to Banning's Landing, which is
15
a
minutes.
city facility.
And one of the impacts of the new on-dock yard is that the amount of blockages on that crossing would escalate exponentially. So that makes this a must-do in order for the new on-dock yard to work.
Okay, very good.
If no other questions, thank you, and we'll turn to number 2. Thank you. CDBG.
The stimulus funding.
Somebody from CDD? Don't be shy. So this is a revised plan for the receipt of the CDBG Community Development Block Grant monies. Tell us all about it. Good morning.
Good morning, David. Good morning, David Esparza, Assistant General Manager, CDD. Before you, you have a transmittal with a revised our block grant funding plan attached to it. There were some questions raised by HUD when we had submitted the original plan, and they had asked for clarification on a number of the projects and programs that we have submitted. So we have gone back and, provided additional information and clarification to those specific programs and projects, and we'll be resubmitting this to them. It's due to HUD by the 28th of July, and so we will be resubmitting it. And so, and the other part about this was that there was also a question raised in the Personnel Committee as to identifying $500,000 in order to cover fringe benefit costs for 18 positions in the Bureau of Street Services. And as a result of the reallocation of some project funds within this plan, we have used those to cover that $500,000 shortage. So this essentially brings together all the controller's instructions, the dollars that were missing in the initial proposal, and some clarifying project description information.
Okay. So we have the changes made on the Mavericks Flat. Are there any other changes that were pulled out?
No, that was the only one.
Okay. And we've had this before, colleagues. Are there any questions about the resubmitted plan? And that was based on feedback from the Housing and Urban Development Department here. If there are no questions, okay?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify. The city has, I think, only until July the 28th to respond to any questions that HUD has on any of our projects. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's our deadline?
Yes.
I'd like to make a suggestion, if you are on a conference call or however you do your response, that you include someone from the CLA's office. Probably Meg Barclay would be a good choice, so that you have her as a resource to ensure that any inquiries, especially on these specific council office projects, can be answered as quickly as possible. Is that something that you can accept?
Yes, we can make that
And
arrangement.
then one other quick question. Did the city receive a waiver on the 25% public services cap from HUD?
No. We have not received that waiver, and so what we've done, though, is taken a portion of the funds that were allocated to public services and redistributed into a community-based development organization.
So they rendered a determination on that question,
Yes.
though? Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, I would, Mr. Rosendahl first, and then I would second what Ms. Berry said about adding the CLA as well to the communications.
If you look at your attachment one, if we read it, number 19 is sidewalk and curb construction program.
Yes.
And you got a citywide and a figure of $2,542,800 in that. I know I have 3 or 4 census tracts that suggest this, but I've had a tremendous desire from a group in Mar Vista to do this whole oval business behind Fire Station 62. We had put it into the stimulus package discussions. Will I be getting any of this money for curbs and sidewalks in the 11th district, do you know?
In the original discussion on this item, it was determined that, they would divide up the funding for this and allocate $133,000 of the funds to each council district. So yes, you will.
So then we'll have an opportunity to focus in on those particular situations.
So just to be clear, regardless of income, I mean, I believe there's a council district or two possibly, that have no low
Right.
census tracts, they can't qualify for it.
Right, it would have to be in a qualified census tract, yeah. I do apologize for that.
And that's how we can adopt some of this into
Yes.
my area. Good. Thank you.
All right. Yes, Ms. Hung.
Okay, jobs. This is, you're reallocating money to the sidewalk and curb construction program.
Yes.
Okay, I always talk about this idea of getting stimulus dollars for sidewalk and curb repair, and this is my idea of, hundreds of maybe even young people learning how to fix and install curbs and sidewalks all across our city. I look down here and only 18 jobs from this. Just help me understand it. Why it's only 18 jobs?
Well, the Bureau of Streets and Services, those are the positions that they've identified for this. They might be able to better answer your question on why, how they came to that
Such
number.
hard-working guys.
Yeah, I know.
Good morning, Ron Olive, Assistant Director with the Bureau of Street Services. Yes, this is the 18 positions we feel is what's adequate, basically 2 crews to fund the $2 million.
And these are just current jobs in the city?
Yes, and this is, the 18 positions really, we've had CDBG funds in previous years and 18 positions authorized to do similar amount of work.
Right.
And so we know that this is...
I know, and I mean, I think that's an ongoing struggle is our already city workers doing the work, but this is one of those things, Herb, I was seeing this like summer jobs. We could have trained a lot of young people across the city and people would have loved it. Can you imagine if we had fixed every sidewalk and curb in the city with young people this summer? That's how I envision these stimulus recovery dollars. And it just really never seems to pan out like that. And I know we don't want to take jobs away from our city workers, but man, I just thought this was one of the things we could have really negotiated with our city unions on trying to, there's so many people out of work in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of young people who would have loved these kinds of jobs. And it might have been a skill that we could have trained them for that would have, ultimately when the recovery picked back up, we might could have even brought them on as city workers. That was my idea for the stimulus funds, but it just never seems to work like that.
We agree, and we are working on that. The whole ARA program hit us kind of quickly, and we weren't able to react quick enough, but as Councilman Rosendahl knows, through the Public Works Committee and the point-of-sale program, we have been working with CDD on some strategies if and when a point-of-sale or another strategy to do comprehensive sidewalk repair is done, to have such a training and vocational worker program.
I know. Just once, I wish one of these grants had been enough money to fix every single sidewalk in Los Angeles. People would have loved it. We could have put people back to work, trained people in this kind of skill. That really would have been something that even the president probably would have come out to celebrate.
Round 2?
Huh?
We should start lobbying on round 2.
Yeah, I know.
If there's a second stimulus.
Let's not be caught off guard if that happens.
We won't be. Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Wesson.
I agree wholeheartedly with Janice, as I'm sure you do, and Bill as well. Now, nobody has a crystal ball, but I would imagine that at some point in time, once this money does begin to flow across America, that there's probably going to be a discussion about a need for another one. And in the event that discussion takes place, I think we as a council should somehow try to be engaged in it, maybe via our president who has certain relationships, because if you want shovel-ready projects, boy, imagine if we got 50 million or I mean, so it might not be out of the realm. I mean, we're talking about putting people to work.
Right.
Projects that are ready to go.
And projects that are really annoy most people who live in L.A. They want us to figure out how to fix those darn sidewalks. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, because it does sound like there might be another round, but we need to, in the mayor's office and Jim, we need to all these projects are great, on-dock rail at the harbor, and, retrofitting urinals in DWP, and, all these projects are all very good, but, this would be something that would be, if we could just for once prioritize a lot of this money.
We changed the whole city.
One big public works project, like fixing people's signs. And again, catch basins are good, and all these things are good. It's just
sidewalks and curbs.
Sidewalks and curbs throughout the city of Los Angeles would be something. I picture people walking out of their front door, and there's a worker on their block, on their sidewalk, wearing the stuff. We're fixing your sidewalk today. I'm telling you, I think it would bring more hope to not only the homeowners, but I think we could put a lot of people to work. That's my dream for the stimulus dollars. And I know we were limited by what we could apply for. We were limited by the channels that money could actually flow into. I understand that. But if there was a way on this next round where we could really do some major public works project in Los Angeles, and we would all have to agree that that would take precedent over a lot of these other projects.
Agreement.
Yeah, I think everything would be really important for this city long term.
Oh, it would change.
Yeah.
Yes, just very briefly, because we got to start council. Yes.
Response that having been chair of Public Works, I got to tell you that every time Bill Robertson would say it would be 80 years to do the sidewalks, and knowing the incredible reality of them and the potential liability and all that, it would just fit in nice and neat. And Public Works has done a great job on all this, but we just need the funds to do it. And it creates the jobs, like you said.
Right. To me, it would be the poster child for this stimulus recovery act. Okay.
I will move then approval of number 2. We'll have the amendment to include the CLA as well, and we will go ahead and approve that. We had public comment earlier. We already have done it, Mr. Sachs, so we're going to start council. So we'll put it into city council for you. This adjourns our Economic Recovery Committee, and we will begin our city council meeting.